sun, half star. Oh, Solangelo. You're listening to Ranking Rick Riordan, a podcast about Percy Jackson and the whole wide rest of the Riordanverse. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga.
And I'm Clara, and today we're giving you our spoiler-filled review of The Sun and the Star and Nico Di Angelo Adventure.
Ranking Rick Riordan is available on youtube.com/doingok and podcast services around the world. So after handing over the pomegranates, Menottes gives the couple some advice about finding Bob. They head towards the Trog shortcut to Tartarus and fight off some Drakons along the way. Nico is amazed at His Majesty's fighting prowess.
We talked about this.
Meanwhile, Will is now really struggling. He's weak and falls and has massive gashes that won't heal. Finally, the Trogs leave them at the River Acheron, and tell them to go to a nearby hut for help.
Pause for a second.
Yeah.
So, the gashes of blood brought up two things I wanted to talk about. One was the amount of blood and talking about blood and blood on people's maws and all that. There's a lot more blood going on in this one than normal, which was, I definitely noted the amount of blood was a lot.
It's a Nico Di Angelo story.
A bloody good time.
Yeah.
The second thing I wanted to mention, which you actually pointed out, which is Will is actually at his worst when they're not even in Tartarus.
Yep.
Once they go into Tartarus, the wounds aren't having a problem anymore.
I was so confused. I was like waiting for this to matter and happen and all of that, and it just didn't. Yeah. And I was confused.
Yeah, it was a little odd. But
So, and this is related to, I have more to say with this next part. So in the hut, the couple meets Gorgira, the river's wife. Acheron merged with the river one day, and since then, Gorgira has been weaving the souls of the depressed and remorseful into her dress. She says Will and Nico can use her canoe to cross into Tartarus, but first she wants them to tell her their story. We are treated to a series of flashbacks/stories about Solangelo's relationship. We hear about Will watching Nico as he helped out in the infirmary, Nico asking Will out in an accidental coming out party, their first kiss after Jason died, and exchanging gifts after the Tower of Nero. So, I mean, I love these flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love this mechanism of Gorgira and, like, exploring their relationship through the storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so weird how a lot of the time these flashbacks, like, in the book, they predate the chapter title. They're just like marked with this like canoe insignia. And then it like jumps into the chapter as, you know, in the current time or like we catch up to.
Yeah.
It basically, it like converges of like we had the flashbacks where Will is suffering and we're like, we don't know what happened to Will.
Yeah.
Why is he fading? But we're telling these stories. Is Gorgira a good guy or a bad guy?
Yeah.
Like you have these questions. And then because they go into Tartarus, we just like stop getting these stories, and it's kind of just like a little sad. I was really fascinated by this method of storytelling that I almost wish that this was like Gorgira was like their key out of Tartarus, and like they were so beat up, and like Will was suffering after everything.
Yeah,
I had exactly the same thought, Olga.
Yeah,
I really like the storytelling mechanism, the nonlinear stuff, the way the book starts with them talking with her. But I did feel that there was something sort of clunky about when everything caught up to each other, where I felt a little let down.
Yeah.
And I don't know necessarily what they should have done differently or could have done differently. I kind of agree with you that maybe if it had gone through the entire book, maybe that would have been better. But
yeah. And I really like Gorgira, like, to be clear. And I feel like her story's really tragic. And she's not, like, a nymph character that I've heard of before. So that was really interesting to, like, mine this territory.
Oh, and I think the thing of the river itself having,
being her husband, like, him taking on the sadness. Oh, yeah.
Especially because,
really
like, we
good.
know Styx is a god. So, like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I also want to hit on the accidental coming out / purposeful coming out thing.
Yeah.
Great in general, but I think it especially was a clear attempt to right the wrong in some ways of the Cupid stuff and how the problematic stuff around that, to sort of give Nico a second chance to do it on his own terms.
Yeah.
So.
Even though it was not on the terms he really thought of, but at the end of the day, it was his choice about whether or not he wanted to go through with it.
Yeah. And again, there's like this explicit calling out of like why the Cupid stuff was a problem.
Yeah.
And again, like that. So now we can have that exist in those older books, and we don't have to go and say like, this is a problem because it's not necessarily problematized right there. Now we know, like, in the future it is when it's about Nico, when Nico gets his POV. And like, that's so good. And I'll just add with this stuff, like, there's a part of me where I was like, I wish we weren't getting like Nico's somewhat like, I don't know, like blunt narration, like sort of like, he's sort of to the point. Wry. And I was like, I wish we had like a real flashback where we saw it happening. But it's him telling his own story, and that's so important and good. So actually, I love it. I came around to it like as it was happening. It's very on theme and good.
Yeah, I agree.
So they set sail for Tartarus and manage to survive the drop via skeletal ramp, courtesy of Nico. He then passes out and Will's head is all turned around by Tartarus. He leaves Nico to try to get a better picture of their surroundings and then is captured by evil pigeons. Nico wakes up to find a Lamian centaur named Amphithemis, searching for the child. Quickly, things get out of hand and Nico realizes he's a mania. He then gets 2 planes of action where Will fights off the bird. Oh, sorry.
We get 2 planes of action.
We get 2 planes of action where Will fights off the Stymphalian birds and some cynocephaly while Nico tries to battle Amphithemis and gets a cool scar. Small Bob comes to Will's rescue. Nico runs into them and Will tricks Amphithemis into fighting the cynocephaly so they can escape. I love that Will solved the problem here, that he was...
Well, and that also Nico wasn't happy about it, too. I think they're sort of...
He felt, that they were at odds about it, but...
They do a good job of making, something we said on the spoiler-free thing, but I don't think we reinforced here enough, is I think they do a good job of making Will and Nico both imperfect. And, Will is definitely being judgmental and not realizing how he's coming off and how he is hurting Nico. And Nico is getting annoyed and hurt, but not voicing that and being closed off in general. And I think that they could have, gone the route of, look at these 2 happy-go-lucky kids in love, and isn't it great that they're in love? Which is what I feel like Hidden Oracle was. But instead, they made them fully realize.
And,
It's not
Olga
just he's a goth.
like...
He's the grumpy goth and he's the sunshiny optimist. It's like, no, and they're both like people and they're both frustrating and frustrated, but they don't know how to talk about it and get on the same page. But it's like love conquers all, but sometimes you just want to be angry at each other.
And this feels like the sort of thing where like Rick was like, oh my God, I need to like make sure that Nico's happy and okay. And so he's in this relationship and that's fine and that's good. And then he's like, but if I wanted to tell a more complete story, like how can I like, I don't want to do that. And so this is where like, him having Mark on board helping is like, now we can have this really complex queer relationship that's like very strong and positive but not perfect.
And we talked a little bit about like what sort of metaphors can we tie to the way that Will is talking about the underworld that maybe you could bring into real life. And I was thinking about maybe if your partner was from a different culture and you didn't understand sort of their traditions or a different religion, and say you were an atheist and your partner was religious and you didn't know how you were coming off to them about certain things. I think there's a lot of interesting things there.
And Will is like trying, but there are certain things that he's just like, I don't know how you can enjoy this and that kind of thing. It's like, because it's who I am. Like it's just so real. It's just the nature of like whatever relationship you have, it's about coming together to an understanding. It doesn't mean that you're always going to agree or always like become convinced by the other person's argument. It's just a matter of like trying and relating to what you can do. And that's like one of the hardest things as a young adult that you can do is like get out of your own head and like care about more than, and I'm not saying you're not capable of love or whatever, like you are, but like, but the thing is, it's like, so it can be so ardent and passionate that like a existence, like a relationship, a give and take, to make that work when your brain isn't done developing is really difficult.
Yeah. And like when you haven't experienced a lot of different things before and like been given opportunities to practice those, like, it's so like, I really liked that Jason and Piper broke up.
Yeah.
I wish that Jason hadn't died. But I really like that they broke up because I love this. Like, you see these perfect relationships. And Percy and Annabeth is still kind of like perfect. They're not, but they kind of are. And so this one for me is like, this is what I want. I want this for kids to see. Like, this is a goal. This is a relationship goal. Not Percy, Annabeth. That's kind of weird.
I see. Like, this is exactly why I was worried about this book. It's people like you. No, I still think Percy and Annabeth are great in a different way.
No, me too. But it's not something to aim for.
It doesn't feel attainable.
That's great. Right. If you
use the word unique and not weird, I'm more on board.
Sure. That's what I mean. Of course I do.
I just feel like Percy and Annabeth is storybook a little bit. Like, again, they're still their own people, but that's the thing. They're more like their own people, but then their relationship is so strong. Like, once you get over the like love triangle stuff, like from that point on, you're like, they are inevitable. Like they are.
I think you guys are a little bit oversimplifying. I mean, even think about how much he was struggling to like let her go on her own in Mark of Athena.
But even then, it's
about. Was there ever a question that they would stay together?
I was never questioning in this book that they would stay together.
Well, only because it's a book that's about the relationship.
But the thing is that, like, even though I didn't doubt that they couldn't find a solution, the problems they were facing were so much more grounded than like the problems of. And again, there is a relatability of Annabeth and Percy. We're on record. I'm saying on record a lot, but we have a podcast. We talk about it a lot. But the thing is that, like, when I think about that, just my gut feeling about Percy and Annabeth is that they're just like two halves of a whole, and they fit together like a puzzle piece to like make a really complete picture. And that's called codependence.
Which is what their issue was.
Correct. And that's why that is also a valid like story and issue and thing to explore. But
you guys need to reread Mark of Athena and House of Hades.
Gladly. However, I'm just saying that, like, I read this book and Nico and Will, I'm just like, this is what becoming an adult is, and like learning empathy. And it's something that is like a daily part of having a life with someone. It just feels like a long-term relationship and living in that and learning that. And that's really
which
rare.
Is why I think of that as a positive and a negative. I really don't think most of this stuff feels like they're two 15-year-olds. It does not read right to me. But
I think 15-year-olds today are so much more able to have these sorts of conversations. They literally have vocabularies that we don't. They have therapists, Dan. I was never offered a therapist and I needed one.
I had one when I was 11. So
and it didn't help.
The conversations, I feel like, are just at a level of like there's I don't know. There just feels like there's so many. All right. Well, if you're 15, let us know how cool you are. I guess.
I'm not saying that there aren't people out there that no 15-year-olds ever talked like this and no 15-year-olds ever had a complex relationship. I'm just saying I feel like they're talking about things that I didn't even think about until like 3 years ago. Like so.
Wait, what?
No, like even the idea of like, I feel like you and I are still learning about how to comfort each other in ways that are different. Like that's not something I even remotely thought about at 15. Yeah. I was just hoping I could find anyone who would talk to me.
I mean, you're right. But this is the thing where like I agree completely. Like this isn't how 15-year-olds talk. However, this is like a fictional world with fictional problems and like scenarios that an average 15-year-old isn't ever going to encounter. Yeah. So, but yeah, there is some stuff here where it's like, oh, this was written by someone who recently went through this, or at the very least, like is going through this in a relationship, in a long-term, partnership. Yeah. But I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
But why couldn't it be the vocabulary that a 15-year-old has? Like, I don't think that a 15-year-old is incapable of this, right?
So, like, saying.
No, I know, but exactly. So, but like, if we had social emotional learning as like part of our curriculum in schools, and if kids had access to like social workers and therapists and like people who could work with them on skills and relationships like this, then like, so it's not necessarily unrealistic for a 15-year-old. It's unrealistic for our society as it is right now,
I suppose.
But like if we're working towards this,
I just feel like there were, and this was the first book, honestly, where I was reading, and I wish I was reading it on a Kindle and could highlight things and save quotes, because there are quotes that I think are fantastic, and then there are other quotes where I'm like, I'm just hearing Rick and or Mark right now. And this isn't coming out of Nico or Will's mouth. This is coming out of the author's mouth. And I can't give you the specific examples because I was listening to an audiobook and wasn't highlighting things.
Yeah, I had similar moments and I could have annotated, but that's just not what I do. But yeah, it's not that it's impossible. It's just that it feels so advanced that it's not what I associate with like the average teenager talking like.
Yeah.
There are teenagers that do talk like this, but
it's not even just about talking as much as I'm like, I think there's just a level of maturity that comes with having been through, again, they're weirdos because they're demigods and have trauma and all that stuff. But I'm just like, I think to have these kinds of conversations in a relationship, you have to like have been in the relationship for a while. And so the fact that they've been together for like 6 months or whatever, like, I don't know. But
I think it's about an individual's skills and whether they're willing to apply those skills in a relationship. Like, these are all just skills that you have or you don't have, and that you can always learn at any point. So, like, but I really like your idea of, like, what if it was, like, an older brother, older sister character having a conversation and then they reach those. But I do agree, like, and some of the vocab, I actually have one section highlighted where I was like, this sentence doesn't feel right. I love the things that they learn and how they react to each other, but there are some language choices that feel weird.
That's honestly, them like learning these lessons and having these ideas is one thing. The way they specifically talk about them and that was some of the stuff. Whereas like, I like you were saying, like where I wished that they had someone who helped them reach that specific wording, who would have that age, that could combine it with their experience and make that happen. And I mean, I don't want to totally jump ahead, but that was also sort of my issue with the Piper scene, where I think there's some really good stuff in there. And then there's some stuff where I felt like an author's writing a thing. I don't know. It just didn't seem like someone talking. It didn't even, that part I'm not even necessarily saying, oh, they're 15, as much as I'm like, this doesn't sound like dialogue. This sounds like...
That's what I noted. Yeah, it wasn't like an age appropriate. It was like, this is a very formal sentence to think about being said. And I bet because you were having the audiobook, you noticed it even more because you were hearing it and you were like, wait, what?
Yeah.
All right, we should move on.
Yeah, I think so. Woo!
Yeah.
Nico is upset with Will for using Ampy and abandoning him. They have an argument, but make up while Will bandages Nico. Small Bob leads them back to the boat, and they travel the river towards Jameson's hut. After almost being digested, the trio gets off at a swamp, and Will starts to see the beauty of the underworld. The cynocephaly attack once more, and Nico tries to raise the dead to help him, but instead raises two Eterra. Eterra? It says Eterra, but I thought it was Eterna.
I think it is Eterna.
Okay.
The
Eterna are cuckoo. And actually want to die a bunch so they can collect more bones for their collection. It's pretty off-putting. And also Mark loves them.
Well, so this is something that interesting from the Mark talk, as far as Mark said that they were the one who wanted to use these creatures that
Since like childhood.
Yeah, that like are very rarely talked about. They're just from an Alexander the Great like journal or
Legend,
something.
Yeah.
And that the original version of this was way darker and scarier. And Rick was like, what if we don't do
I know, it's funny.
Well, which in a way is even more disturbing. Like, this is definitely the darkest humor that they've ever had in this show.
Yeah,
like,
in this show.
You know what I mean? Aside from maybe like some of the stuff in Magnus.
But,
like, them like asking to be murdered is like, pretty dark.
Yeah. I would love to see the first draft of this.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I like what happened with it.
I do too, but I want to read the horror.
Yeah.
I love it. I love I loved this. And also I retroactively apologize if I got Mark's pronouns wrong earlier. I don't remember if I did.
Yeah.
I think we've been pretty on top of it.
I think so, but
I didn't realize that they used they, them.
I don't know that they exclusively do, but they certainly do at times, so that's what I'm sticking with.
Yeah.
I just checked and they have they them on their bio, so I'm going with that. But anyway, apologies.
So the trio take refuge in Jameson's hut, but appears he hasn't regenerated yet. After some rest, they leave and head toward the Mansion of Night.
The Mansion of Night!
They find Bob trapped in a regeneration pod and are only able to break it by combining their powers, the sun and the star. The imagery of Bob and Iapetus like switching between the two and like trying to screaming in pain and rage and all that. It was
yeah. Well, I thought you were also the talk of them combining their powers, which is just something we don't get as much of.
I mean, that was cool too. Yeah.
I also I felt like dumb that I didn't like understand why he was a star until this point. I was like, oh, that makes sense. That was dumb of me.
He's our star. He's the star of the show.
Think? I just didn't know why he was supposed to be a star.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the idea being that he is a bright spot in the darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't.
Okay.
I hadn't crossed my mind because I hadn't really been thinking about it that much.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so a few things about Bob here. One, he doesn't seem like Bob. And you can say, oh, he's been changing back and forth. He got his memories back. Maybe that's made him like wiser and more solemn or whatever. But I was very thrown off by the way he spoke and it not being the way I remembered Bob speaking. I also think that part of that is the audiobook and the voice that they used for Bob, which was like much more like, Nico and Will, blah, blah, blah. And, well, no, that's more like the normal one. That's more, like, I think of him as being sort of like dopey Hulk. And instead he was like, Nico and Will, blah, blah, like, much more like, I don't know, like stately.
Okay.
Dan, can you do that for the rest of the podcast, please?
I didn't notice that as much as a reader, but I did feel it a little bit. I was like, this is
I just remember him talking in short sentences and using third person more.
Yeah. I actually like gaslit myself. And so I'm glad that you said this because I was reading and I was like, I must not be remembering Bob, right?
I do remember the third person, but that was the thing where I'm like, maybe I did see him as coming back smarter.
Yeah.
So I think this makes sense as growth. Like, a lot of these things you can like rationalize.
Yeah.
So after Bob is freed, Nyx appears with an army of her children. There's a callback to Percy and Annabeth's tourism trick, and then a fight breaks out.
I was very surprised because I was like, this felt so much like the redemption of Nyx.
Yeah.
But then they called back to it and it actually worked.
Yeah.
Which I was also surprised by.
I know.
So, yeah.
Yeah. It's the thing that this book does really well. It's the thing with Persephone. It's the thing with the Cupid scene. It's being really like self-aware. The more self-aware and explicit it is in correcting the weirdness of the past, it succeeds.
So the trio is able to escape when the Mansion of Night mysteriously catches fire. Nyx calls forth small shadowy figures and claims they are Nico's children. Each represents one of his demons, such as grief, anger, and
other stuff.
Such. Okay.
I couldn't remember what the rest were.
I think.
Jealousy?
Yeah. I remember lonely. I was like really touched. Oh.
Grief was the main one I remember.
Yeah. But... Another battle breaks out, and Will channels his darkness into a blast of hay fever.
Which I thought was great.
That was funny. A lady without a face sneezing and snotting is really funny to picture. Nico takes control of his demons, aka the Cocoa Puffs, and sets them free, fulfilling the prophecy. Nemesis, Hypnos, and Epiales are sick of their mother and subdue her so Nico, Bob, and Will can escape. They take the boat back down the river, but Nyx quickly recovers and chases after them, but is ultimately defeated by the power of the river Acheron because she is nothing but misery.
All right, let's pause.
Yes.
So what do you guys think about this climax?
I liked it.
So I got a little confused by the action. And part of this was like, I had gotten 2 hours of sleep, blah, blah, blah. But I was a little confused. There were like a lot of things going on and it was very exciting and engaging, but I was just a little like spatially confused. And this is where I was just like a little bit also confused about like, what does Nyx want versus like some of her kids versus like and I was like, okay, I was like, this is fine. Like, let's move on. Like, clearly she sucks.
I think the idea is that she wants him to give in and just stay in Tartarus and, like, be one of her hench people.
Yeah.
And accept that all he is evil. But
and
that is kind of a vague, subjective goal.
Yeah.
But, I will say, we got a comment today that someone said that Mark had said that they had never written action before this and a Star Wars thing they wrote around the same time. So I do think that the lack of action is notable in this book for this series. I'll say I thought the climax was good. It was very like what I expected. But I don't know if that's not always a bad thing. If it's like, oh, this is the fulfillment of the thesis. Oh, he's literally facing his demon. Like, so it's fine.
For me, I was not expecting the Cocoa Puffs. I was not expecting Nico children and them being like monstrous. But you know, the way that he accepts the demons, but then releases it, like that was really good. I thought that the whole like. How once we knew that Nemesis was like there, I was like, oh, well, obviously Nemesis is going to be like key to them getting out. So that to me was a little bit like, especially when they kept hammering how we don't know how we're actually going to get out of here. So the fact that like all of a sudden also Hypnos matters. And I like that Epiales came back. But to me, it was more like the three of them mushing together didn't super work. I don't
think that they totally earned that. Hypnos and Epiales joined in with Nemesis to restrain her. It's a fun idea, but you know, it just kind of like there were just parts of this where I was like, yeah, it's a kid's book still, but whatever. Yeah,
the bugs screaming, like the house screaming in the fire.
I think so. The book that I was reading on the plane to Wales was the very last book in the Aru Shah series, and I think. Having that sort of like two of these books read kind of back to back, it really illustrated like when you have 5 books, you can really build to a really, really high pitch. And when you have one book, you like can't do that. And I think this book does a lot in one book, but like imagine if we had had 3 or 5.
Yeah.
It would have necessarily been higher.
Yeah. Oh man. If this was another trilogy, that would have been very interesting.
I think there was enough from Nyx that we could have gotten a trilogy around Nyx. But I am glad we're not in Tartarus for 3 more books.
That's the thing. I don't want to be in Tartarus for 3 books in a row.
Well, why did she come to that? Whatever. It didn't happen.
They all end up in space together.
Oh, my God. Well, that's what happens in Aru, so. All right. The Cocoa Puffs join the crew, and Nico happily adopts them. Will apologizes for trying to change Nico, and Nico apologizes for being so closed off all the time. Nico falls asleep on the boat and dreams of his mom and sister. At first, he assumes Nyx is playing another trick.
A Nyx trick.
Thank you, Dan. But Hades appears and assures him that these are really pieces of their spirits. His father tells him he sent the prophecy and is proud that he saved Bob. Hades decides to grant Nico a wish, and Nico asks for Amphithemis to finally find peace. Hades leaves Nico, and he says goodbye to his family, finding some small bit of closure.
All right.
This really reminded me of the Hades and Nico scene in the church.
Yeah.
And that to me is like, I still think about that scene. And so this like is such a good pairing with it.
Yeah. Great Hades stuff here. I really like Nico's wish about Amphithemis. And that how it fits well into him as a character, but it's also like, you're such a good son of Hades. That what you care about is his soul going to rest.
So good. So good. I read this scene and there's like the description of like Hades is sort of like this awkward, like a child in the back with this family. And like he just feels sort of like out of place and stuff. And all I could think of was that first description we get of him with like he has eyes like a suicide bomber or whatever. And like look where he is now. I love Hades.
He's
I
wearing
love
a bowler
hat.
I want to ship Hades and Apollo. I mean that's kind of what we have with Will and Nico.
Yeah,
but like, Apollo's better than either of them. So there.
Okay.
I don't know, but. I don't know.
Write the fanfic. Go for it. That's what I always say. The way you were saying, Clara, earlier that you were like sitting there and thinking of Dan, like he trogs. Dan is gonna love this. I was like reading this and I was like, ooh, Hades family melodrama and like interpersonal Hades goth relationship. Clara's gonna love this. She's gonna be kicking her feet and being like, "Yay!"
I was thousands of feet in the air. I was kicking my feet, thinking, "Yee."
Good stuff.
So Nico wakes up in Camp Half-Blood's Canoe Lake and embraces Chiron, which Nico hugging someone, that's new. Bob leaves, cherishing his freedom and deciding to head west.
Which, Percy's west, so I was wondering if that...
He's going to go there and beat Percy up for not for not rescuing him.
Yeah.
After filling everyone in on their journey, Nico calls Piper. They talk about their shared grief and how Piper has been discovering her sexuality. People aren't just one thing. They don't always fit into labels, and even if they do now, they might not stay that way. Nico and Will have a final cute moment of reflection as they cuddle with Nico's demons.
Okay, a couple quick things about the Piper stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I said most of what I wanted to say, but I want to say at least, I'm happy that they talk about the grief and that it's still a thing, and that he also talks about how, like, Shell has been good about the grief and stuff. Thought that was cool. I'm very glad that they confirmed that she was attracted to Jason, and, like... because that had been a big like debate, whether it was all supposed to be like just in her head from her mom and stuff like that. And I think it's interesting. Labels are such an interesting thing. I think especially with characters where I definitely see what they're saying here, and the idea of like labels don't really matter that much. I do think it's interesting with characters because someone being a specific label makes it easier for you as a reader to be like, I'm that label too, therefore they're like my hero. And so in some ways, I definitely think it's a mature take to not give Piper one. But I also think it's interesting. It's an interesting choice because I do think if they like made her a bi girl, then she would be like a bi icon, you know. But I guess yeah.
So I was actually thinking a lot about this because I actually find it really helpful to have representation of a character who doesn't want to put a label on her sexuality because I'm in that situation. I truly don't. Like, I identify as queer, but I don't have a good label for my sexuality. And so actually having a character who's able to say, like, I might identify as this one way, like one day, sometimes a label might help me, sometimes it might not, I might change, I might, like, that's really helpful for me. And I feel like this book has a lot of, like, Nico's gay.
Will's bi.
You know, like there's Will's bi, like there are these coming out moments that are really important and powerful. Piper, like, sort of can't come out in that same way because she doesn't have a label to say, you know, like, so for me, I think that there's a lot of power in having her have that, even if that's not for everyone.
That's a great point.
Yeah. I think that there is as much representation in not not providing labels there is in giving one. And again, people still relate to, you still find bits and pieces of a character to relate to be like, I'm like that. So that I don't think that ever
I
really
just
changes.
think I'm more just like, I think labels are interesting and how they can be helpful and very unhelpful at the same time. And depending on the person and depending on the time of the person's life, like, it's just,
it's fascinating. It's interesting.
And for representation, because, like, absolutely. To your point, like, it's helpful to be able to have someone who you can say, like, and that's the person, like, that's like me, yay.
All right, so that was The Sun and the Star. Before.
No.
So we have been talking a lot, and we are starting to get some feedback come in, but we would love more. So please send us your thoughts at ourpodcastfeedback@gmail.com. Comment on the YouTube version of this podcast or tweet at us at Ranking Riordan. Also, please send us reviews on Apple Pods and Audible or rate us on Spotify. We'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, so we have feedback, and I wanted to do feedback, but this has gone on, and I knew this was going to go on for a long time. So we're probably going to do feedback in some sort of separate manner that I haven't figured out yet, because I don't necessarily want to, like, tack it onto an RO thing.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll do something else that's like Nico specific or something. We'll figure it out. Maybe we could talk in more detail about what we want for future books and stuff.
Oh, wow.
All right. Let's be frank. It's time to rank. This one's good, but that one stank. Ranking Rick Riordan.
You forgot again.
The pressure got to you.
I was thinking in my head, I was like, you know what one stank was? The Hidden Oracle. And I was like, I'm supposed to keep singing now.
You had one job, Daniel. Oh, man. This is...
All right. So we have some interesting things to rank. More than just the books. So we're starting with Best Hero. Our top 10 worst to best is currently Alex, Leo, Sam, Annabeth, Meg, Nico, Piper, Sadie, Percy, Lester. And I have here nominations for Will, Bob, I guess, and maybe moving Nico. What are we thinking?
This is really difficult.
I have a controversial take.
Oh.
I was going to say the same thing. Dan, you say yours first.
I think we should swap Percy and Nico.
Ooh, I did want to put Nico right below Percy, but that's fascinating.
I think Nico's definitely had a bigger and more interesting character arc than Percy has. So we could just put him as number 2, but...
I'm stunned. I am incapable of speaking.
I mean, he would still be top 5.
Barely.
He'd still be 5.
It's hard for me to have Piper above Percy.
Okay, fine.
I can't.
All right.
No, Sadie is not above Percy.
All right, fine. Sure.
Yeah.
Fine, but I still think Nico should be number 2.
You know,
that's fine. I'm not gonna argue with it. I'm putting it before me.
I can agree with this. Yeah.
And
wow.
I'm gonna argue that we don't add Will, even though I think Will is very good. Yeah. I don't think that Will's better than Alex.
Yeah. I agree. That's the thing. Like, I can't knock anyone out of this top 10 for Will. Sorry, Will.
I mean, I think Will would get in our top 20, but I only wrote down our top 10. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had to cut so many worthy heroes from this top 10, and it hurts every time.
You guys, I can't believe the top 2 are Lester and Nico. You have made my week.
All right, best god.
I knew we'd get there. Sorry, let me just... Yes!
This really is a redemption for Hidden Oracle, more than anything else.
God.
That is.
Best god. Thor, Artemis, Bast, Mr. D, Hermes, Set, Juno, Hades, Apollo, and Bess is number 1. Nominees, Persephone, Nemesis, and I don't know if you want to move Hades, but probably not.
I can't imagine moving Hades. Apollo and Bess are so, they're so good. Yeah. Just put yourself back into...
Bess, I don't want to move. I feel so good about my one Lester that I'd be willing to move Apollo because, as a god, I mean, we've gone back and forth on this so much.
Staying
but
where he is.
No, okay, all right, that's fine.
So my sort of weird argument here is I think we should keep Thor where he is, but replace Artemis with Persephone.
Why are we keeping Thor where he is?
Because I think Thor should stay on the list, but I don't think Artemis needs to.
But why?
Because we should have at least one from that series.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I also think Thor is fun. And
Thor was fun.
But Artemis is a better character.
Is she?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like Artemis as the god, Artemis. But in the book,
what does she really bring?
She doesn't do that much.
You know what? I agree. Let's put Persephone instead of Artemis. I'm down.
Yep. I was just checking to see whether there was anything else I'd want to move.
And I don't need Nemesis. Nemesis was interesting or whatever, but I didn't get much out of her. Yeah.
She's too much of a side character when she does show up in this series, in this world.
Yeah.
So I guess to be clear for people, we now have number 10 Thor, number 9 Persephone.
Everyone else is the same.
All right.
Should we move up Mr. D?
Oh, yeah, I thought about that.
I was thinking that.
Hermes is really good, though.
But I know, and so is Set, and so is...
Juno should really stay where she is, for sure, but...
Right. I think we're also... I think
you could... I wouldn't be upset if we swapped Mr. D and Set, but I also don't necessarily want to do that.
No, Set was really good.
No, Set was great.
I just wanted to bring it up before we fully...
Set is so good, he's the only bad god that we allowed on the list.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Best baddie is a very difficult one. Number 10, Octavian, Mr. Alderman, Set, Caligula, Orion, Loki, Luke, Setne, Commodus, and Nero. I had Noms, Nyx, and Epiales. I mean, we're not really going to put Epiales, but Nyx. The problem is I like Nyx, but I don't think I like Nyx more than Octavian or Mr. Alderman.
I don't think Nyx works better than, again, Nyx's metaphor is useful, but Nyx as a baddie, I don't think is better than what we have already.
What if we cut Caligula and put Nyx at number 10?
No.
Caligula was really
Caligula was awful.
I didn't like Caligula when they came back, but
okay, that's your problem.
All right, so we're sticking with our list. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nyx.
All right, best ships.
Oh, sorry.
All right, so we had we did this with tiers. So the last, I believe, 2, 9 and 10 weren't in tier S, but I wanted to give our top 10.
Okay.
So our top 10 is Frank and Hazel, Carter and Zia, Sadie and Wanubis, Bess and Tawarit, Sam and Amir, Nico and Will, Leo and Calypso, Sally and Paul, Magnus and Alex, Percy and Annabeth. So where do we want to move Nico and Will to?
Oh, this is going to be controversial.
Yeah.
I still think that, well,
I would put them at number 3.
Well, that's what I was starting to say. And then I was like, well, Magnus and Alex, we saw like so little of their relationship. But it's about a ship, not the ship part.
Here's the thing that's complicated and that I don't really know how to like put into words. But like, even though I think that their relationship is well written and mature in this book, I don't like ship them personally. Like, I'm like, they're well written. Good on you. But Magnus and Alex, I'm like, hell yeah, give me more.
Yeah.
And so like, but that's like a weird thing I can't define. Like,
yeah.
No, it's what I was feeling with the, like, we didn't get these flashback moments. Everything happened off camera. And even though we have this book, it's like them in a really mature relationship. We didn't get all that, like, the cute stuff.
We got some.
Yeah.
We did. And, like, it was cute, but we didn't, like...
Well, the other thing is that, like, even though I think they did a good job with Will in this book, and I definitely like Will more, Will isn't an S-tier character to me still, whereas I think that Magnus and Alex both are.
Yeah.
So that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
So do we all agree on this?
I guess so. I guess Nico and Will are number 3.
With only Magnus, Alex, and Percy and Annabeth above them.
Yeah.
And Sally and Paul below them.
I feel like that between all 4 of these couples are like goals.
Yeah. And I'm glad that we're moving them above Leo and Calypso.
Yeah, because that
felt like a mistake looking back at it.
Should we move them down?
Leo and Calypso? We could. I don't really know where I'd put them.
I don't think so. Because the thing is that, like, their relationship grew and it's interesting. Like, it also changed and has different facets. Like, I kind of, like, flip-flop on it in a way that makes their placement as 5 makes sense to me.
All right, here's the big kahuna.
Okay.
Book rankings. All right. Hidden Oracle, Sea of Monsters, Tyrant's Tomb, Red Pyramid, Sword of Summer, Lost Hero, Son of Neptune, Serpent Shadow, Hammer of Thor, Blood of Olympus, Lightning Thief, Battle of the Labyrinth, Titan's Curse, Throne of Fire, Burning Maze, Ship of the Dead, Mark of Athena, Last Olympian, Dark Prophecy, House of Hades, and Tower of Nero. All right, do we want to start with placing this book, or do we want to start with the changes that I need to make to this list?
That you want to make to this list?
Guys, our group chat is 90% talking about moving Lightning Thief. Even though that's not actually true, it feels that way. All right, let's do it.
I want to put Tower of Nero somewhere around the Throne of Fire Burning Maze area.
No.
I can't let this thing be number 1. I have too many issues with it for it to be number 1. I don't know what. I just gave in.
But Dan, I thought you loved dogs now.
I like this book. I think it deserves to be in the top 10. I think it should be under Burning Maze.
I would put it between. Hold on. I'm not giving you an inch.
Like, whoa.
I'll give you half an inch.
All right. What if it's between Ship of the Dead and Mark of Athena?
That's what I was going to do, but I don't want to relent so much.
No, I think it makes sense.
Yay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
And
no, it's all right. As long as that's where
I think that's more. I was not ready to push it as low as Dan initially said, but yeah.
And then the next thing I will suggest is putting Lightning Thief ahead of Titan's Curse.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, y'all have really worn me down on the, like, it makes sense. It makes sense. It's iconic.
It also means that Lightning Thief will be in the top 10.
Yeah, it deserves to be. Like, it needs to be. Yeah.
All right. So now let's talk about this book.
All right, where does Sun and the Star go? Because at the end of the day, I do have a lot of issues with it. And yeah.
Hold on. Sorry. House of Hades is number 1 now?
Yeah, it's the best one.
Yeah.
Olga, okay.
What were you going to say? That's the thing.
No, it's fine. I don't know. I was going to give in to you with Last Olympian.
Well. I mean, I think House of Hades really deserves to be where it is.
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with also revisiting that at some point.
Yeah, I don't.
We're going to be back here for Chalice of the Gods in a few months. So.
Oh yeah.
And that
I'll
time,
reread everything.
Yeah.
God.
I'll make a PowerPoint presentation.
Good.
Do I still want to do that thing that I joked about of like listening to our rankings in order and seeing if I agree instead of listening to each book series and like getting myself really confused about mythology and canon?
I think someone wrote in about chronological order, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
All right, my first thought for Sun and the Star is between Lightning Thief and Throne of Fire. How does that sit with people?
So that leaves Lightning Thief right at number 10.
Which I think makes sense.
I think so. It's so hard as a standalone novel.
Yeah.
It's so hard because it just doesn't have those like big, because all of our tops are sort of the like, these are the heights of the...
Yeah. But also not the actual heights, because aside from Last Olympian, we don't usually love his final books.
Yeah.
I guess we like Ship of the Dead.
I guess we love Tower of Nero.
Yeah, sure.
Even if we've all forgot.
I didn't forget. I just love other things more.
The real problem is Throne of Fire, which I think is like an impeccable, perfect book, but is not nearly as deep as something like this.
Well, that's why it being next to Lightning Thief makes sense to me.
Yeah, they're like these perfect little gems.
Well, and so I would argue that Burning Maze is a better book than Sun and the Star, because I think it hits on a lot of the similar mature adult themes, including stuff with like relationships with the Piper stuff, and the grief stuff. And on top of that, it has set pieces that I'm going to remember more. It has Apollo, who's great, and it has Caligula.
Yeah.
Who is also...
They go through a maze and have to do puzzles. I like a good puzzle.
Yeah.
I feel like The Sun and the Star should be at 10.
Oh.
I just feel like Lightning Thief and Throne of Fire are stronger books overall. And while like there's a lot of emotional goodness, catharsis, there we go. Like there's a lot of catharsis in The Sun and the Star. And I overall, again, have like positive feelings towards it, that there was like enough that didn't feel like it made a ton of sense. Like the writing could be a bit clunky sometimes. The action wasn't as good as it was in Lightning Thief or Throne of Fire. Like I mean, think they're I'm sure that this is like not a popular opinion.
Well, I really don't know. I
love this book for Nico's story, but as its own story, and like I'm so glad it exists and it's really important. But I agree, like as an iconic book, it's hard. And I think it's partly just because it's standalone.
Yeah. I mean, again, and part of it is there's a lot of distance from these other books. But
I know,
there were a lot of things that as I read, I was like, oh, when would I want to pick this up again? So, I mean, like, it's hard putting this below the Magnus books.
Ship of the Dead was good. I think Ship of the Dead might be a little too high on the list, but I feel like I need to reread it.
It doesn't.
I think, I can't remember.
No touchy.
Ship of the Dead is one of the few ones where I only read it one time, so it's not as
I really enjoyed it,
firmly
so I
in
don't
my
want
brain.
Yeah.
All right, so
but I remember that climax, that scene, that book's climax really vividly, more than I remember a lot of the others. Yeah. So
also the kiss is so good and the cold.
Yeah.
It was really cold.
No, that's a great book. Yeah. It gets left where it is.
So does it go above or below Lightning Thief?
I think it's below Lightning Thief. I really think that Lightning Thief is a stronger overall.
This is so
because we were like so not moving Lightning Thief for so long.
No. I'm just saying that in general, trying to rank between a like really, really good kids book and a like much more meaningful but maybe doesn't hit the mark on everything it's trying to do as much book. Like it'd be like how would I compare like Lion King and like I don't know, like Saving Private Ryan or something. Like I don't.
I'm pretty sure one of those won an Oscar.
I'm pretty sure both of them did.
Oh, did they not go against each other in the Best Picture?
I don't think that's the same exact year.
Am I getting it confused with Beauty and the Beast and how that won Best Picture one year? Maybe. Well, the point is that we have other books that are far from perfect high on this list. Like, we're not looking for perfection here.
I think it should be... Well, what we really need is Clara to make the decision. Clara. Because I'm saying above Lightning Thief and she's saying below.
I know. And this is really hard because I wanted Lightning Thief high. There's something okay to me about having Lightning Thief as 10.
Yep.
Where it's like everything rests on this foundation that this provided. And I do find Lightning Thief is, like, just so good.
Yep.
So don't you want it to be higher?
I think it should be number 10. But I think there's something poetic about it being number 10.
Right, that's what I'm saying. But I agree with Olga that I think it's maybe... But I think this should be 9.
All right.
I think there's something poetic about Lightning Thief being 10. And I think that this does a lot that I haven't seen in a lot of... We've read so many of these now, and this does stuff on a level that I haven't seen in a lot of the others, and I think that's great.
Yeah. And again, there's a level of focus here because you only have one book. It's focused on these two characters. It is a very, like, strategically... paced book, I guess, is the idea. And even though I'm like, here's what I would have liked more, and here's where I would have wished you'd done X, Y, or Z differently. Like, again, that is true of literally every book on this list. So that can't really be like the judge of the measure of this list. It's really more like, how much of this do I want to change? And with Hidden Oracle, it's like 90%. So honestly...
I'm going to read the top 10.
Go for it.
Top 10 is Lightning Thief, Sun and Star, Throne of Fire, Burning Maze, Ship of the Dead, Tower of Nero, Mark of Athena, Last Olympian, Dark Prophecy, and House of Hades.
A different Tartarus journey is number 1. I feel good about that.
All right. So one last thing I feel like maybe we should have hit on earlier is I think it's worth noting and like how big of a deal this book is and how important it must be for people. And how great it is that, however many years ago it was that the Cupid thing happened and I was flabbergasted, and where we are now with the two boys on the cover together. And I think that that's really meaningful.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that we say that.
Yeah. No, thank you for taking the time. And we're so like, it's definitely something that's easy to take for granted. And right now is not the time to do that when books like this are being challenged. It does feel regressive in a lot of ways that, things are.
Wait, what are you trying to say?
I'm trying to say that basically like, right now, there's a lot of movements to keep queer voices down and to protect the children from stories of love and joy and identity because people are small-minded and afraid and ignorant. And you're right that like, whereas, 10, 15 years ago, ignorance was arguably in a different place with things like this. Nonetheless, this is like very momentous, and it feels like we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. I'll add, like, I've been thinking about Nico, and I've been thinking about myself like a lot in preparation for this podcast. And I just remember when we talked about the Cupid scene on this podcast, I'm pretty sure I'm on record as being like, well, like, as a straight person, I blah, 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 blah. Like, literally, like, and so I just think about, like, how characters grow and evolve and their stories change, and, like, thinking about how we identify and thinking about how our relationships take a turn and how the world changes. And, like, this book really means a lot to me. Like, as you say, like, having these two boys on a cover at a time when, like, I'm really worried about, like, the fact that, like, you know, my marriage might put me in danger, right? Like, but to see these two boys on this cover and the fact that that's so celebrated, like, that's fantastic. And having opportunities for joy like that, like, really, really means a ton.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where we rank this or what critiques I have or whatever. The point is that this is going to be a really important book for a lot of people, and I think that's fantastic.
I'm so happy that readers get to have this experience with these characters.
Yeah.
All right. All that being said, thank you guys so much for watching/listening. We'll see if I end up putting this out as 2 parts. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But thank you guys, and may the gods be ever in your favor.
Bye-bye.
Bye.